Hi class, today we're going to be learning about rate of change. So this is similar to constant of proportionality where we are looking for patterns in tables or graphs. The definition of rate of change is how much is it changing in one unit. So if we have two units given to us, for example, hours, number of hours, and number of samples here. One of these is always going to be our x values, and one of them is always our y values. In a table, we know our x values are going to be on the left side, and our y values are going to be on the right side. So I want you to go ahead and label both of those on your paper. So we're going to label number of hours is x, and number of samples is y. Okay? So when we're looking for the rate of change, we're asking ourselves, how much is y, so when we say it, we mean y, changing in 1 unit for x. So every time our x goes up by 1 unit, how much does y go up? So instead of just looking at the relationship between the numbers here, we're looking at the pattern that we see throughout the table. So let's look at our x values first. First thing I'm going to do is go down the table and I'm going to see what are my x values increasing, or sometimes they might be decreasing by each unit. So I notice from 2 to 3 my x value increased by 1. From 3 to 4 it increased by 1 again. 4 to 5 same thing, and 5 to 6. So in my table every time my x values are increasing by 1. Okay, now I want to do the same thing with my y values. So I'm looking at the number of samples. My first number of samples for 2 hours is 76 samples. Then at 3 hours, it increased to 114. So I want to know how much did it increase by. So we can subtract 114 minus 76. We can subtract to see how much it increased by. So I know if it's at 114 and it was at 76, it increased by 38. So I'm going to put plus 38 here. Okay, from 114 to 152, it increased by 38 again. So I notice in my table, every single time x increased by 1, y increased by 38. So this is my rate of change. Y increased by 38 every time x increased by 1. So we're always going to write the change in our y values, and we can write it with this little triangle symbol. That means change. So that just means how much did y change over how much did x change. So in my table, every time I went up, y changed by 38, so that goes on top. X changed by 1, so that goes on bottom. And then we just simplify. I know 38 over 1, or 38 divided by 1, gives me 38. So this number tells me my unit rate, or my rate of change for the table. It tells me that there are 38 samples for every hour, or 38 samples per hour. And that's my rate of change. Okay, so let's look at the second table. This time we're comparing hours of video streaming to the cost that you have to pay to stream. So we want to find the rate of change. We want to know how much does it cost per hour, so for 1 hour. So if we look at our table, we don't see the cost for only 1 hour. So that's why we need to use our rate of change to find it. So again, we're going to look for our patterns in our table first in x and y. So our hours are our x values, and our cost is our y values. Okay, if I'm looking at my x values, it starts at 0 and then it goes to 2. So I notice it's increasing by 2 hours. And from 2 to 4, it's increasing by 2 hours. And same thing from 4 to 6. So my change in my X values every time is 2 hours. Now I'm going to do the same thing with Y. So for my Y values, it starts at 75 cents for 0 hours, and then it increases up to $1.75. So I noticed that I added $1 between those two. And then from $1.75 to $2.75, I added one more dollar. And then same thing here, added one more dollar. So to get my rate of change, this is telling me that every time we added 2 hours to our video streaming, we added $1 to our cost. So if I want to know what is the cost per hour, that means for 1 hour, again, I'm going to write how much did Y increase by over how much did X increase by. Okay, my change in my Y value every time was $1, so that goes on top. My change in my X values every time was 2 hours, so that goes on bottom. And then I can simplify that. $1 divided by 2 is going to give me 50 cents. So I know the cost per hour is 50 cents per hour. And that is my rate of change. Alright, so we also need to be able to find the rate of change when we're given a graph like this. So this graph shows us Jana's cookie sales. Our y-axis, which is going up and down, it's labeled boxes of cookies sold. And our x-axis, which is always on the bottom, going left to right, is labeled time in hours. So we know these are the two things we're comparing, hours and the number of cookies sold. So before we can find the rate of change from our graph, we need to make a table. So we're going to make a table just like the ones we were looking at in the first two examples. And we're going to label one side X and one side Y. We know we always put X on the left side. And we know in this case our X axis is hours. So I'm going to put hours. And my y-axis on the other side is labeled cookies sold, so I'm just going to put cookies. Okay? Now we need to take some points from our graph to put them in our table. So remember, each point on this graph has a x and a y value. But we want to choose points that are on whole numbers, preferably not decimals or fractions, just because it's a little harder to tell exactly where they are. So this looks like a good point right here. Looks like this is exactly at 2, and that's my x value. And my y value is halfway between 20 and 40, which means this right here is 30. So my y value is 30. Okay? Now we only really need maybe 3 points to do this, so I'm just going to pick 2 more. So this looks like a good one. And this one, my x value is 4, and my y value is 60. And let's see. Those might be the best two to pick for this example, so we can just leave it at 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and look for our pattern. My x is increasing by 2 hours, while my y is increasing by 30 boxes of cookies. So we want to know how many cookies did they sell per hour. Since they sold 30 in 2 hours, my change in my y value is 30 cookies sold in 2 hours. That's my change in x. This is my change in y. If I simplify this, 30 over 2, 30 divided by 2 gives me 15. So I know they sold 15 cookies per hour. And that's the rate of change. Okay, we need to do the same thing with this graph over here. So this time, we'll go ahead and make our table. we have our X value is labeled months and our Y value is labeled the cost of rental. So not sure what we're renting, but we're figuring out how much it costs to rent something for X amount of months. So my X value is going to be labeled months, and my Y values are going to be cost in dollars. And now I just need to choose some points from my graph. So again, I want to pick some exact points. So I can do this first point right here that's right on my y-axis. I know the X value here is 0, and the Y value is halfway between 30 and 60. So we could say this is about 45. So our X value is 45. Oh, whoops, sorry. Our X value is 0. Our Y value is 45. Okay, and let's try to find 2 more. So this looks like a good one. My X value is 3, and my Y value is halfway between 90 and 120. So that's going to be about 105. Okay, and then the last one that looks good is right here, where my X value is 6, and my Y value is halfway between 150 and 180, so that's going to be 165. Okay, so again, we're looking for the rate of change, which means we want to know how much money are we adding to the cost each month. So for 1 month, how much money do we add to the cost? So I'm going to look for a pattern. And notice in my Y values, from 45 to 105, my cost goes up by $60. And then from 105 to 165, it goes up by another $60. My X values, from 0 months to 3 months, we increased by 3 months. And then from 3 months to 6 months, we also increased by 3. So this tells me that for every 3 months, we added $60 to the cost. But we want to know for every 1 month, how much did we add to the cost. So again, we're going to write the change in our Y values over the change in our X values. My change in Y was 60. My change in X was 30. Now I just need to simplify. So 60 divided by 30 gives me 2. So I know for each month, oh, I'm sorry, not 60 divided by 30, it's 60 divided by 3 because our X went up by 3 every time. 60 divided by 3 gives me 20, which means it costs $20 per month, and that's our rate of change.